So I'll go ahead and jump in. My name's Kevin. I lead the research community project at Digital Promise, along with a few other colleagues who are here in the call. And thanks for your interest in the seed funding opportunity. This is our second seed funding opportunity. It comes 2 years after the previous one. So, in the hour we have today, I'll just do just a brief overview of OpenSciEd, and I think most people know about OpenSciEd, but in terms of our goals for the research community. And before we jump into the seed funding opportunity, we wanted to kind of springboard it with some initial findings from a challenge map survey that we administered several months ago, and we're in the midst of analyzing. So that's going to hopefully springboard some research topics that we feel like address the needs of our practitioners who use OpenSciEd, and then go into some seed funding opportunity details, a way we devised to help connect partners, both for the seed funding opportunity specifically and longer term, and then enough time for some Q&A from the people here. So I think everyone knows this, right? OpenSciEd, it's an open, Creative Commons, it's freely available. It's kind of why you're all here, right? It stands to be very broadly adopted, and as such, like it's really unique design and affordances kind of give it a lot of leverage for addressing research gaps, right, in science education, right? So that's kind of our main mission, is we want to take advantage of these affordances to move forward research in science education and related fields. So that's what we're all about. And so this team is, we've been working for about 3 years, right, with the Research Agenda project, the previous one, and now with more of a focus on actually building this community of researchers, innovators, and practitioners, right? Really trying to identify what are the research priorities for OpenSciEd, help connect you all to each other, and support you in ways that allow you to get your research ideas off the ground, right? To sort of build community, so we're connected. We have some resources. We have a newsletter. At the center of all this are those 3 things in that triangle, right? Which is we're really trying to leverage, again, the distinctiveness of OpenSciEd. Want to keep equity at the center of our work around OpenSciEd, and address salient gaps. So I wanted to springboard the seed funding opportunity with just some initial work that we've done as supported by Jim Short and the Carnegie Corporation. One of the things we want to do was develop what we call this challenge map, where we identify what are the key areas of support that practitioners, in particular teachers and district leaders, right, who are in position of adopting and implementing OpenSciEd even at a district level, right? What are those areas of support that they really need to be successful with OpenSciEd, right? So we're gathering the perspectives. We administered a survey, basically a challenge survey. I'll talk about the design of that in a second. We've also recently conducted some focus group interviews with practitioners at different levels to hear some more details about, where are their areas of challenge and where can research support them, right? And we're envisioning this challenge map is going to lead to, to be able to frame new research questions that really directly address the needs of practitioners, the folks in the field who are really implementing this with students. And so we thought this was a really good way to frame our second seed funding opportunity. This is more for the benefit. I don't expect everyone to read all this right now, but we'll be posting these slides later, as well as a recording, so people can look at it a little more carefully later. But we came up from our prior research syntheses of these 22 challenges in these 4 different categories, right, around classroom enactment, supporting teachers, sort of system level, which would be school and district and even statewide issues, and then equity. So our 22 challenges fell in these 4 categories, which we put in the challenge survey. We asked in the survey for respondents to rate how often they experienced or observed the challenge, right? To actually describe the student groups that they saw experiencing equity challenges. We asked them to select 3 of the challenges as being especially high priority and to tell us a little about the reasons that they chose those priority challenges, and then to get some background information on each respondent. We had over 150 respondents who were middle and high school teachers. High school were mostly from the most recent, the ongoing field test effort, and also leaders at different levels, right? Building, district, and even a few state leaders. And we sampled across urban, suburban, and rural settings to make sure that we got the full range of contexts that are using OpenSciEd. For analysis, right, we identified emerging categories for the student groups who are experiencing the equity challenges. Right, we summarized the ratings and the priorities. And we really looked closely at the open-ended responses to identify these overarching themes and tensions that I'll share in a moment. And we have conducted, as I mentioned, about 10 focus group interviews involving, I think, about 30 participants. And our analysis of that is underway. And we'll actually be presenting that at NARST in Denver in March. So if you happen to be around there, we'll present an updated version of this analysis then. So this is our very high-level summary of kind of the themes and tensions that we found, primarily from the surveys. And so those 6, the ones in the white ovals, those are basically, the challenges from the list, a little bit modified to capture where sometimes there were challenges that got merged. But basically, we saw these 6 really float to the top, both in terms of how often they were experienced and the priority that people identified for them, right? And those 6 are, as you can see, teacher pedagogy, promoting that culture of figuring out in students and sustaining student engagement. Teachers expressed challenges in finding time to plan and reflect. Assessment, as we know, is always a challenge. It's not unique to OpenSciEd, but there were some things that were distinctive to OpenSciEd around assessment, and the customization, adaptation of materials. And we placed these on this triangle where the vertices are these 3 sort of larger themes. And each of these is in tension. We observe these to be in tension between either 2 or 3 of these themes, which are the culture shifts that are needed, right, within classrooms, schools, and districts in order to meet these challenges. General, just teacher time and capacity, the capacity that teachers need in order to be successful, and then meeting the needs of students. Those are the 3 things that seem to pull on each of these challenges. And I'll just go just a little bit in detail just on each of these 6, right? So by sustaining student engagement, right, we mean that students are becoming fatigued from how much time is just required to kind of model and explain this anchoring phenomenon, right? These units are designed to be 6 weeks, and it's necessary to engage in this phenomenon to really fully explain it. But students just aren't used to being in the same place, studying the same phenomenon for that long, and express some fatigue. Also, this idea of iterative revision, which is central to authentic science practice. Rather than viewing it as a growth process, students seem to view it as repetitive. So that's something that teachers could use some support with. And then sustaining participation in discussion activities, especially for students, because it demands such a high level of language in terms of explanation and discussion. People reported that it was especially relevant to multilingual learners and students with disabilities. In terms of the promoting culture of figuring out, there seems to be a struggle, right, to sort of shift from these traditional classroom cultures of learning facts, being right or wrong, and teachers telling students what to do next, as opposed to these responsibilities being on students. So that's just a difficult shift that takes more than just one implementation of a unit, right? It has to happen over time. A couple more areas, shifting pedagogy and buy-in, right? So just teachers having to shift from what it is that they used to do with typical materials to a more facilitation model in OpenSciEd. It's a profound shift. It requires a lot of experience with the units, substantial PD and support. And sometimes those supports are hard to come by. And then one thing that was interesting that came up is that, especially for teachers for whom OpenSciEd is kind of imposed from above, there can be buy-in challenges as expected if teachers are not really on board. They're not choosing to do OpenSciEd themselves, but rather being dictated. That's something came up in terms of teacher capacity. Time to plan and reflect. I think that's pretty self-explanatory in terms of the amount of time it takes to understand and prepare and plan lessons, especially the first 1 or 2 times that they're done. The time and monitoring students, especially with large class sizes. The need to have time to collaborate with especially with building colleagues to stay together. That takes time. The release time teachers need for PD is not always there. And then this interesting comment about there not being down days, right? That you're always on. And so, with traditional materials, often teachers can give students something to do while they catch up. And that wasn't really possible without leaving OpenSciEd entirely. That was an interesting comment. The last two, in terms of customization, teachers especially expressed a lot of time needed to customize slides to the needs of particular students, especially multilingual learners and students with disabilities, and also to local phenomenon contexts. And with assessment, several challenges. Just generally, we all know 3D assessment to be challenging, but especially to emphasize assessment as more of a formative activity rather than summative. This is adjustment for both teachers and students. Right, mapping assessment practices to grading expectations was raised quite frequently, and then again overlapping with the other challenge, just the time to monitor students and give them timely and helpful feedback interacts with the complexity of 3D assessment. It's difficult to be both timely and helpful in terms of 3D proficiency. So we wanted this to be a launching point for the seed funding opportunity. So I'll go into this a little bit. This year, as opposed to a larger number of sort of smaller grants, we gave seed funding recipients about $9,000 last time. We wanted to go bigger this time around. So we're going to offer fewer grants, but of larger awards to support people going for larger proposals and more ambitious proposals involving partnerships and sort of larger questions about implementation, evaluation, and the like, right? So the timeline would be that people could use their seed funding from this time period next year in 2024 for about 6 months, with extensions being possible afterward. For people who received our seed funding last time, these are some things that they remarked were especially helpful, in addition just to the funds themselves, which could fund activities. They especially appreciated, the support for developing, these particular, scholarly products, especially conference papers and proposals, right? The opportunity to network and connect with other funding recipients and other scholars. The Digital Promise team offered to provide critical feedback on work in progress, so that was appreciated. Right, the ability to kind of gather new data, and some people had data, but they just didn't have the resources to be able to analyze pilot data that they felt like they needed to make their proposals more competitive. So this gave them the chance to do that. And then, we also connected scholars with each other to kind of mutually support each other in terms of giving feedback on the proposals. So these were things that the last round of seed funding recipients said that were helpful. So this time around, as I mentioned, we wanted to go a little bit bigger, more ambitious with the goal, right? We wanted to focus here, right, not just to be narrowly on research, but it could be anything related, including design, development, could be evaluation. We're open to any kind of research adjacent types of activities that would take advantage of OpenSciEd distinctiveness and move forward OpenSciEd goals, including the improvement of OpenSciEd itself. We want to really encourage cross-institutional partnerships. So a necessary part of the sort of larger focus would be that people would join forces with another institution with complementary expertise, right? And it could be any kind of partnership. It could be between different researchers having different levels of expertise. It could be between researcher and a school district or other practitioner. Could be with an evaluator. You just want to make sure that there was more than one individual scholar on board, so you'd be able to take advantage of cross-institutional expertise. And then a couple of other priorities we wanted, right? That we'd really like to see a focus. Basically, this first bullet is kind of to be aligned with the challenge map that we identified, right? These are the kinds of things that we identified as necessary supports for schools and districts to adopt and implement OpenSciEd sustainably, right? So that would include, basically addressing the key challenges that were on the previous slide. It could be designs, it could be supports, identifying processes, mechanisms, and the like, right? And then again, examples of sort of larger types of studies that we're hoping to see people tackle, efficacy, effectiveness, scale up, right? Capacity building, and so on. So we're kind of upping the amount of the funding, requesting people to come in with partnerships so that we can tackle those larger questions. These are some examples of things. This is not a complete list, but to use the seed funding for travel, consultants, right? Supporting graduate students or other students, to do preliminary data analysis, literature review, and the like, right? Honoraria. Last year people asked, if I'm at a nonprofit, can I use it to support my salary to write the proposal? Yes, that's perfectly fine, right? So, any expenses that basically help get a competitive large proposal out the door is what we're looking to see. The kinds of things that we would want the grantees to be able to do, right? So we would want to schedule regular check-ins. Say, I think with last time, teams scheduled monthly check-ins with us just to update on progress and give feedback on artifacts, right? You wouldn't necessarily in the application have identified a specific grant program. Maybe you have 2 or 3 that you think are good possibilities, but during the grant period, right, you'd want to narrow that down to the most appropriate opportunity to submit to, right? So to articulate a 6-month plan or so for advancing an initial proposal concept to a submittable proposal, right? So that's what we would expect from grantees there. And then, to produce artifacts that demonstrate this progress toward the submission, right? And we're trying not to make this, it should be things that you would do anyway, right? Not to go out of your way just to sort of report digital promise, right? Where we're looking for things that you would need to do along the way in order to, the goal is a competitive proposal, right? So any intermediate analyses or progress reports that, that allow you to plan and reflect on that. That's really the goal. Again, a concise final report, or some other deliverable in your application, we would just have you suggest what that would be, right? Again, the reason is we don't want you going out of your way to produce something that is not helpful to you, right? So deliverables that are helpful in crafting a competitive proposal. Our role is just basically to support you in any way that you express that you could use our support, right? Whether that's connecting to other people, helping identify the funding opportunity, giving you feedback, whatever it is that would be helpful that's in our capacity, we'll work to do. In terms of who's eligible, right? Basically, all these kind of boil down to that the applicant, the seed funding applicant should be qualified to actually be the principal investigator or lead on the eventual large proposal submission, right? So, that you're in a field of study that that enables you to investigate OpenSciEd, that you're at a research institution that can support your proposal, right? And that you have the capacity to be the PI or the lead on the eventual submission, right? We encourage applications, especially from underrepresented groups. This wasn't an issue except in one case where we really want to make sure that it doesn't take 3 or 4 months to transfer the seed funds, right? So just to make sure that you can execute that contract in a reasonable amount of time. We're hoping to do that within a month or so. So in terms of the timeline, right, we'll post these slides. So there are some links in here. This is also on our webpage. The application is there. So there's the timeline, January of application deadline. We will review and notify recipients by March 1st, and then hopefully start getting the work underway in April. The application itself, there's 3 main parts to it. Right? There's an online form where you just respond to some prompts. Most of them are about 100-word responses. And then there's the main concept paper, right? Which is, we're envisioning 1,000 words, right? And basically to describe what your current vision of the research proposal that you'll eventually submit, right, to NSF or IES or Philanthropic Foundation. And we don't have a particular structure for that. We want to make sure that you are free to think and communicate that proposal idea in the way that works best for you. And then finally, there's a document that you would attach to the application. And it basically just describes like what activities would you engage in, what's the timeline for those activities, what deliverables would you produce, right? And then there's a simple estimated budget, very informal. We have a template, just a simple table in terms of, how much money would you need to do A, B, and C activities that you've planned for the seed funding period. So once we confirm that everything's there, we'll convene an expert panel. It's much like an NSF panel, if anyone has been on one of those, where multiple people would read the proposals, and we discuss, how well it is that they meet the criteria and the priorities, and kind of gauge the potential to result in a competitive proposal. And then finally, this relates to both the seed funding opportunity and our research community more broadly, right? We've just established a mechanism for potentially connecting partners. So there's a form. It's here in these slides, and I think we'll be linking it to our webpage as well, right? Where you can submit your role. Basically, you would fill out, what it is, what kind of opportunity would I be interested in either leading or collaborating on, right? And then if you fill out the form, then you would see the list of other people who put their other information in, and hopefully you'd be able to find some mutual areas of interest to collaborate on a potential project, right? So in terms of the timeline, you can do it anytime, but if you do it earlier, and you're hoping to find someone to collaborate with specifically for the seed funding opportunity, then we would share the information with people on the list by January 5th, a couple weeks ahead of the application deadline. But you're welcome to do it after that, as part of our general support for the research community. If you're just looking for some other opportunity to pursue, we're happy to connect people in that way as well. So at this point, we're just going to leave it. What time is it? Oh yeah, about halfway through. So just to leave plenty of time for any Q&A that people would have, feel free to, if you want to unmute and voice your question. We'll also monitor the chat. I haven't been looking at the chat. I see there's 17 things in there. So I and my colleagues will sort of monitor the chat, and we'll get to answering as many questions as we can. If we don't have an answer to the question today, We will make sure to document it, and we'll be putting a like an FAQ page on the website. So we'll make sure that anything that isn't answered today gets answered in the FAQ document. We'll do our best to provide any answers today. I see. Most of these 17 looks like were people's introductions. Okay, so I do see let's see. There was a hand raised, but I lost it. Sorry.
That's me.
Oh, that Matt. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I am just curious about like the competitive proposal. Should that opportunity be identified before submitting the seed proposal?
If you have like a one particular opportunity, that would be fine. But it isn't
If you don't,
required.
is that still okay? Okay, got it.
Yeah, it's okay if you have just sort of a general space. And if you were to list, say, 3 or so possible opportunities that were kind of consistent with your vision, that's completely fine. Yeah, we're not necessarily expecting that people have a specific solicitation.
And if the seed effort is focused on developing that partnership, is that kind of fitting with the intent of this opportunity?
That's right. Yeah. So if, like, for instance, you're not as far as identifying a particular district that you want to work with, but you have some other kind of partner, that with complementary expertise. Yeah, that could be your partnership. And part of the seed funded work could be to establish and develop a relationship with this practitioner partner. That's right.
Yeah, because we're private, we're an AI startup, so it would be an interesting relationship both with a district and with a researcher.
Yep.
Cool.
I have a question. You mentioned that you're going to have a forum to connect partners and possible collaborators. You said it might be up on the website at some point. Do you have a timeline for when that would be ready to share?
Rochelle, are you available to Rochelle's been close to the timeline on that. Like, in terms of share, you mean when we would be releasing the contacts?
Or even the form itself? It doesn't, I was just looking, I didn't see it on the website, and so I was just curious when that would be available.
The form should be available very
Michelle
soon.
said we have it now. She's going to put the link in the chat in a moment. So you'll have it just now.
Okay. Great.
And then that tells that the form will give information on when to have it completed if you're interested in a partner for the purpose of the seed funding versus if you're just thinking more generally.
It is possible we anticipated a lot more questions this time around. Having done this 2 years ago, we had many more questions in this phase of the webinar. But now that we've gone through the process, maybe we were much more clear this time. Also, if your question doesn't occur to you now, but it does later, then feel free to just reach out directly to us. We'll have our contacts. It could be either me or Rochelle. You could reach out to by email. Could maybe like another minute or so. But if people feel fairly clear, we could just adjourn. anyone have any questions on the sort of the type of concept, or questions on the concept paper? This is one question that we also get, right, in terms of what makes a good concept paper. Like when I write proposals, like as part of our institution, right, all investigators who plan to submit a proposal, we actually submit a concept for internal review, right? So this is something that I do at a nonprofit institution routinely, but not everyone does this as part of their routine process for preparing for a proposal, right? So anyway, let us know if anyone wants any more details on that. Well, meanwhile, let me I just have like a couple of closing slides that I could show. Oh no, I got to refine my presentation. Oh, here we go. Sorry, I lost my control bar. I can't seem to find my presentation and the share screen button at the same time. Anyone?
That happens to me all the time.
I can share my presentation.
I wish I could say what works either. I just start clicking madly. Command tab, command.
I know, no. Every time I do that, my slide goes away. Share. Okay, let me exit this, and then.
If you're on a Mac and this gesture is supported, swiping up with 4 fingers might help. You can tell who's been in the classroom.
Oh, shit. Okay, here we go. Here's what I'll do. Okay, I found share screen. This is close enough. All right, there we go. I'm back, right?
You've been here the whole time.
But you see that Q&A? The slide?
No.
No? Okay, share. There. No.
Now we see the slide, yes.
The slide. Thank you. Thank you so much. So this is us. Right. I'm the lead. Jeremy's a kind of high level lead and advisor. Your communication would be mostly with either me or Rochelle, the project manager. Anthony brings expertise in working with districts and at the state level. Danae is a researcher. Kellyanne's our communications manager. So just feel free to reach out to us individually with questions. We'll get back to you. Again, the slide deck is going to go up on our webpage, and these are some links to some helpful resources, right? Our RFA, which lists kind of all the things, except in a little more detail, that I went through regarding the application process. There's a link to the application. There are these 3 reports that we wrote in the previous iteration of this previous round of funding for the research agenda, right? There's a research agenda document, a logic model, which actually seed funding applicants found the logic model helpful as well to help sort of structure, right? How is it that your intervention or program, would be, what's the sort of expected mechanism by which that would cause improvement? Right? And then we have a synthesis paper, right? The synthesis paper, as of, I think, late 2022, reviewed all available empirical research related to OpenSciEd. So it summarizes and kind of extracts main themes. So I think that's also a useful document to kind of get caught up on what's known to this point, like what research you would be building from in a new proposal. So those are all in the slide deck. It'll be posted soon. And then this is our webpage to kind of stay connected to us, right? If you're not on our mailing list for updates on other events, please fill out the form and let us know. But otherwise, if there aren't any other questions, I think we could just adjourn for today.